Now back to Smoke on the Water for more Straight Up with Sturge.
All righty, welcome back in. It's 8:27 on this Monday night edition of Straight Up with Sturge. Hoping it's not going to be our last edition of the week, but unfortunately that may be very well the case when Mother Nature gets done with us. Let's go back to the guest line. Let's bring on Matt Norlander. He is a writer for CBSSports.com, Sports on Earth, and a whole other lot of stuff, Matt. And you can be followed on Twitter at Matt Norlander. How are we doing this evening?
Well, thanks for having me on. We're doing fine. And as someone who grew up in Vermont and lives in Connecticut, where we have about, I don't know, maybe 12 to 14 inches on the ground, I got to know what your snow situation is looking like that might prevent you from getting on the radio the rest of the week.
Right now, they changed it this afternoon to a little over 8 inches of snow, roughly for Greenville. The National Weather Service said 8.4 inches with a little bit of ice on top of it. Listen, we'll be
that's no joke. That's near apocalypse stuff down there. So I give you no grief for that whatsoever, and safe travels to you and everyone down in that area whenever it does land.
Absolutely. And Matt, if the city of Atlanta is not prepared for this one because they don't know it's coming, then they've got nobody to blame but themselves this week. But let's start with you wrote an outstanding column about what took place Saturday night there in Lubbock, Texas. Marcus Smart, everybody knows at this point, pushes a fan on the first row. Did you see this coming in any way, shape, or form with everybody kind of being able to get on Marcus over the last month, with him being the king of flopping and then the king of complaining? Did you see this coming, and what do you think about the 3-game suspension when all's said and done?
Well, real quick on the suspension, I'm fine with that number, and I think actually almost everyone is. I feel like when that number was announced, I didn't see one person say that's too harsh or too light. So that was nice to see everyone kind of accept that and kind of feel that was fairly reasonable. Obviously, you couldn't have seen this coming in terms of Marcus doing what he did with the fan, but yes, there were other signs that he was just having a season of a lot of struggle, more than maybe he anticipated, given, performance-wise, he had kicked a chair and actually left the floor during the only win, actually, ironically, in the past few weeks that Oklahoma State has had when they beat West Virginia. Marcus actually didn't have a good game, and so he had, I believe, fouled out and kicked the chair and left the floor, and then he apologized. Afterward on Twitter, said, I won't let my teammates down like that again. I won't lose my composure. Obviously, he did that to a much worse degree on Saturday. I do think this is going to remain with him and the team for the rest of the season. As much as they would like to move on, it's just not going to be possible because the next 3 games, they got 3 tough ones ahead. Without Smart on the floor, it's going to be hard for them to win, and every time they don't win without him, that's going to be part of the questions. And even going forward, if Smart is able to play well, if the team's able to play well, this is still going to be something players get asked about, and at least, it's out there. So from that perspective, it looks like Oklahoma State's in a really tough position going forward. But, I don't entirely blame Smart for what he did. He shouldn't have done it, but a lot of us can't really put ourselves in that total position of being an athlete, high profile, losing streak. This was the toughest loss of them all. Don't know what he heard. It was the end of a game that they were about to lose. So there were a lot of factors that went into that, and he does deserve some blame, but not all of it.
Matt, Price Atkinson sitting in with Mark Sturgis tonight, and I want to tell just everybody again your column that ran on Sports on Earth called Taking Responsibility about the Marcus Smart situation and your take on it, and it's an absolute must-read, a great job on your part. And it brought up something that I thought you did an outstanding job presenting, and it's something that I think a lot of folks it's kind of almost a blind eye turned a little bit toward it. And I've got, young kids. Mark's got, a daughter. I take my son to games now, and he hears things coming from behind us in the stands, and I almost want to earmuff him sometimes when I hear things. But your column really hit on, holding fans accountable. And I'm going to read just a quick line. It's high time we held fans completely accountable. At the very least, as part of ensuing investigations for incidents involving them and players. They have no more right to verbally or physically attack a player than a player has to attack them. They're equals. And it goes on. But, talk about that fans, just because you buy a ticket and pay $25 to go watch a college basketball game sitting fifth row, have the right to sit there and verbally accost for 40 minutes an 18-year-old kid up and down the court.
Right, and thanks for the kind words with that. 99% of the time this isn't an issue, obviously, either because the fan is, quite frankly, out of earshot and knows no matter what he said, it's not going to get down to the floor or the field. But, the 1% of the time we do deal with this, obviously it can be a noteworthy or a straight-up ugly incident, and so we should address that appropriately. It is very odd how there are certain fans that feel like you can't do this in any other walk of life. Like, if someone wanted to walk up to you in the middle of your radio show and call you a piece of crap, like, that's not acceptable, and you just don't have that happen. And for whatever reason, and I think part of the reason, actually, is that there's this weird tension that exists a lot of the time between fans and athletes, in that, the athlete is the athlete. It's a privileged individual from an athletic standpoint, and obviously has been able to live a life that most others can't because of those abilities. And then the fan, by way of combating that, I guess, buys the ticket. If it doesn't like the athlete, I paid money to come sit here watch, and if I want to boo you or say worse things than you, I'm going to do that. And it's almost this inferiority thing that comes from the fan, because that's the only thing the fan can do to negatively affect the athlete's life. And so, while, again, 99% of the time that doesn't manifest itself, it does on occasion. And, the fan, Jeff Orr, with Texas Tech, clearly made a huge mistake in at the very least, calling Marcus Smart a piece of crap. And we, by the way, if you want to take his and Texas Tech's word for that, that's fine. But that, I don't know if that was entirely all that was said. It's just high time that we really, whenever these things happen, don't just squarely look at the player and say, why'd you do that? You can't go into the stands. You can't put your hands on a fan. Well, obviously that's the case, but if you're going to be triggered like that, then, knowing the fan's name, making him a public figure, this kind of thing, we'll never know the true impact of it, because I feel like going forward, even if we have incidents like this, we're going to have plenty that never happen because maybe before a fan says something or would do something, he's going to remember that guy's name at Texas Tech, was on SportsCenter and everyone knew who he was, and he couldn't go to the games the rest of the year. So ultimately, I think it has a benefit. It has good impact despite it being an ugly incident.
We're talking with Matt Norlander of CBSSports.com, Sports on Earth, and just a fantastic writer. And Matt, let's switch gears a little bit. When you look at the ACC, a month ago, people were coming on my show, national correspondents, saying it was maybe potentially the biggest disappointment in college basketball. Now, what would you say a month later is it looks like this could end up being a league that gets 5 bids and potentially a 6 bid? And to follow up on that, your thoughts on the job that Brad Brownell's done at Clemson this year with a serious lack of talent?
As far as the ACC and its bids, Syracuse obviously is going to get in, Duke's going to get in, Virginia's going to get in. I think those are the only 3 locks. Pittsburgh should, but again, Pittsburgh could really benefit itself to get a nice win here, and I actually do think the Panthers are going to beat Syracuse later this week and give the Orange their first loss of the season. After that, all right, so I mentioned the 3. Pittsburgh should be. And then Carolina probably will be. In fact, if they beat Duke this week, and that's a home game for Carolina, they should be in. Getting that 6th bid, in my opinion, is going to be really tough, and I'll get to Clemson in just a second. In general, though, when we look at the ACC and what its NCAA tournament profile and picture looks like, I think we do need to take into account that every year the bubble is weak, but this year in particular, we're not getting teams from outside major conferences the Valley only has Wichita State. The West Coast Conference, really, it only has Gonzaga, and even Gonzaga doesn't have a great profile. And usually in most years, even if you go to a Southland or, in the past, if you've gone to, the Valley or anything like that, Conference USA, occasionally, those are leagues that can usually give you 2 bids. This year, because the Big East is a new conference, because the American Athletic Conference is new, those have kind of split up the teams overall. So the ACC is benefiting because it doesn't have a lot of competition from smaller mid-majors that might be able to steal a bit otherwise. So I think that's helped them. As for Clemson, they've done a solid job this year, to be honest, about where I would expect them to be. The offense is just, and Brad obviously knows this, but it's been woefully underperforming. I mean, if the offense was even, just a little bit better, this would be a surefire tournament team because the defense clearly has been so outstanding. I'm not sure where it sits right now, but I know for more than half the season it did allow fewer points per game than anyone in the country. Borderline tournament team right now will have its chances. It gets Virginia this weekend at home. Got to win that game. Got it. And it's going to be a rock fight because Virginia also has that pack line defense. Honestly, that's going to be a final. You just know it, 51-48. That's going to be the final. And that's fine, but, Clemson's got to take advantage of its home games and really do some damage there. Because other than that, I just brought up their schedule. Pittsburgh is the only other win. Because winning at Georgia Tech, winning at Wake Forest, they would be nice, but they're not going to add up to too much. And Clemson's been terrible on the road for the most part this year. So it's got chances, but it's on a very thin layer of ice right now in terms of its NCAA tournament prospects. It's got to get a couple more good wins, and that's probably not going to happen unless the team's shooting ability really improves, and we obviously don't have evidence much of that so far this season.
Matt, one more question from me before we let you go, and Mark wraps it up. But I want to ask you about Wichita State. And it's not going to – the debate's not going to, I don't think, fire up quite yet. I think we're still too early to have this debate. But I want to ask you your thoughts, collectively in terms of looking at Wichita State and what the Shockers have done. Obviously undefeated, haven't lost yet, sitting at 25-0, 12-0 in Missouri Valley. If this thing were to play out the way they're going right now, and let's say they don't lose another game, maybe let's say that they lose only one game. Maybe they just trip and fall in the Missouri Valley tournament, or maybe they lose one more in the regular season. I don't think that would be a bad thing, but that's beside the point. What argument and what realistic chance do you think Greg Marshall's club has it a potential 1 seed in the NCAA tournament? And do you think what they did last year will play into that thought process of the committee?
It will not play into the thought process of the committee. The committee is very, very, very good at taking only the data and information every single year and applying that to what teams have done. So the fact that they made the Final Four last year, while in a general conversational sense seems to make sense, it has zero impact on how Wichita State will be seeded this year. If they run the table and are undefeated on Selection Sunday, they will be a number 1 seed. There is no doubt about it. It's not even a debate, and you might get some debate on that going forward, but it's just surface debate. I'm telling you, if you go undefeated and you're Wichita State and you've had a decent non-conference schedule, you are getting a number 1 seed. If
I agree with you.
If they lose one game, then it gets interesting because their power number's okay, not great. Best win is against St. Louis, which is a very solid win. But you look at St. Louis' schedule, the Billikens, who are 22-2, they lost to Wisconsin and Wichita State. Their wins, their best win might be Vanderbilt, it might be Dayton, it might be Richmond. Within the A-10, they haven't played the big boys yet. St. Louis actually has VCU at home this weekend, and that's a big one. And then it's got a couple of other. They play VCU twice. They play Georgia Washington. And they get Dayton again, and they finish the season at UMass. So Wichita State's profile will be reflected and affected by what St. Louis does going forward. If they only lose one, that is an interesting debate because it's going to be where does that loss come from? Like if they run the table in the regular season and lose in the Missouri Valley tournament, I think it might help them, depending on where that loss comes from, because running the table in the regular season, I think, is a pretty coveted thing. If they lose in the regular season and run the table in the Missouri Valley tournament, could it also help them because they're going to have momentum going into Selection Sunday? We'll see about that. And also remember that Missouri Valley tournament finishes earlier than most others. It's done, I think, with a full week before Selection Sunday, so they're going to have plenty of time to sit back and wait. My guess is with one loss, they will still get a number 1 seed, and with 0, it's a guarantee. It's happening.
Well, Matt, thank you for your time tonight. Our listeners can follow you on Twitter at Matt Norlander. Tell them what you're working on this week. It's rivalry week here in basketball, but where they can find your work and what you're up to this week.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sports on Earth. I'll probably have a thing on San Diego State, which is a team. You know, a lot of people in your area are obviously so football crazy, as they should be, and are kind of just following and getting into college hoops. San Diego State, again, is really good. They only have one loss. Their one loss was against Arizona. So I'm going to be working on a piece on just shedding that team a little more light and telling you what they're all about. CBS Sports-wise, it's kind of take it as it comes with the news, because I'm also on Olympic duty, so things are going to be crazy here. I might be having to get up at 4 a.m. to watch what's happening in downhill skiing and stuff going forward. So I'm splitting my responsibilities between college hoops and Olympics on that side.
All right. Well, we'll try to hook you up with Andrew Catalan, who's over there in Sochi calling curling right now. We got him a couple of days before he left to Russia, and that's been an interesting story in its own right. Listen, thank you for your time. Hope we can check in with you before the big dance starts next month.
All right. Thanks so much. And again, stay safe and stock up on the food before the storm comes.
Oh, we've already done that. Thank you much.
Thank you, Matt.
Norlander from CBSSports.com. Really one of the brightest writers out there on college basketball and everything. And, man, here we come down the stretch with college basketball. Oh, yeah, I have to be up at 4 in the morning to watch Bodie Miller on the downhill. Oh, man. You talking about splitting hairs. That's exactly what's going on. Listen, I know we're a couple of minutes past break, but we had to get to interviews back to back. We'll switch gears a little bit here in the final segment and take your phone calls as well here on Straight Up with Sturge. We are WCCP Talk Sports 104.9 FM, the flagship station of Clemson Athletics.